Katie Mathis, and she's working on a master's program in public health, and for one of her assignments, she has to come speak to a class like this. So, that's what she's gonna do. I told her, the morning class, I said, no one's gonna ask a question in the morning class. And I was wrong, one person asked a question. After a lot of prodding. I said the afternoon class, I said, not gonna be a problem. Okay, so I know you got it at this point. So anyway, take over and.
Okay guys, like you said, my name is Caitlin Mathis, and I'm currently in a Master's of Health program up from Indiana. I live down here, but I'm in a program at Indiana Wesleyan University because I'm originally from here. And I got in the program last summer, and so I'm approaching my first year. And what I had to do for my final this semester was I had to give a presentation, and it was kind of open about what we could give. And so I asked Roy if he had a spot or anything he wanted me to teach on, and he said that this was your next chapter. So let's go. What we're doing today is aging, as you read, maybe read, kind of read. All right, first I'm going to tell you a little bit about what public health is. Oh, thank you. A little bit about what public health is. Public health refers to all organized measures, whether public or private, to prevent disease, promote health, and prolong life among the population as a whole. We don't typically deal with individual diseases. We're not doctors. Typically what we do is we do like vaccination programs, programs where we go overseas and help refugees and camps, things like that. So that's a little bit about what I'm doing and kind of where I'm coming from, because some of the stuff you may see, I'm coming from a kind of a different standpoint than just a medical one. Okay, something that struck me in your book is the epidemiological transition. Your book said in 1900, the average age for an American was 47 years, and in 2008, when your book was written, people typically lived to about 76. And your book says in page 219, when older folks die, the reason is more likely to be chronic disease rather than acute illness. The average 75-year-old now suffers from 3 chronic illnesses and takes 5 prescription medications. Well, that's a big change in really not that long a period of time when you look at history. So, that's backwards. This is called the epidemiological transition, and here it is a little bit bigger. Why India popped up first, I don't know. But here's what we're looking at. This is a little, okay, over here you have mortality. Mortality is high up here, and it gets lower as you go this way. This is the epidemiological transition, is the transition on the bottom. This is the time period. So what you have is you have sub-Saharan Africa up here, because Africa has a lot of communicable diseases still. We're talking measles, polio, TB, things that we over here vaccinate for at 2 years old. Well, their death rate is still very high from those communicable diseases because they're not really industrialized. Whereas over here you have the US, parts of Western Europe, and Japan. Those countries are very industrialized and therefore have way more chronic diseases. Can anybody guess why we might have more chronic diseases over here than in the middle of Africa? We live long enough to get them. We live long enough to get them. Great answer. Why do we live long enough to get them?
Because we don't die from the other diseases.
Right, because we have vaccination programs and things like that. We live long enough to get these diseases because we don't die from these diseases. And so because of that, I mean, COPD, obesity, diabetes are 3 really big ones that kill a lot of Americans every year that live past the age of 76 now, normally well into their 80s or 90s even. So that's the epidemiological transition. In the middle here is India. India's having some interesting problems because India is right in the middle. India is dealing with both of these problems at the same time, which makes for a public health train wreck. Because you're trying to deal with communicable diseases, trying to get vaccination programs to rural areas while your industrialized cities are already dealing with chronic disorders. So they're going to have to get a little bit further up this line before they can start worrying about these less. No, that's backwards. No, it's not. Okay. I really liked this right here. Getting older is unavoidable, but falling apart is not. Sure fact. As you age, so do your cells. Page 222 of your book says older cells have a lower threshold for combating the molecular stressors of free radicals, excessive energy demands, and overexcitability. So as you age, your cells do too. As you fall apart, so do your cells. A lot of the times the reasons you fall apart is because your cells fall apart. Your brain is designed to reroute around damage. This is fascinating to me because your body does it in lots of different ways. Your brain does it, and so do your veins. If you have a blockage in a vein, slowly another vein will reroute and build around it and block off that section. The problem is that takes years to do, and usually if you have a blockage in one vein, you have them all over the place, and your body can't handle it, it backs up, and you get a heart attack. Synaptic activity decreases, dendrites retract, the capillary strength restricts blood flow to your brain. When something doesn't get blood flow, it stops working. Well, your brain is no different. Everybody just kind of sees it that way because your brain is some awesome separate thing. Starting at age 40, we lose an average of 5% of our overall brain volume per decade. That's a lot, and there are ways that you can keep that up instead of losing that much. You'll probably only lose 2% or so, and we'll talk about those. Using the prefrontal cortex takes day-to-day operations. That's when you do, like, you forget how to button your pants, you forget where you left your car keys, you forget how to tie your shoes. That's your prefrontal cortex. The temporal lobe is affected by Alzheimer's. Temporal lobe is when whole areas start to kind of shut down on it, and you forget major life things, like who your family is, things like that. That's why these tend to be very hard. These are diseases that tend to be very hard on family members. And family members require care just as they're caring for people with these diseases. A study from the Rush Alzheimer's Disease Center, those who feel lonely are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's. Genuinely did not surprise me. A lot of things that you'll experience in your life, medical-wise, have a lot to do with your mood. All right, dementia. In 2013, your book predicted that by age 85, between 25, oh no, I'm so sorry, this is from the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, not this book. In 2013, when this article was written, by age 85, between 25 and 50% of adults exhibit signs of Alzheimer's. That's a lot. But part of that is because the number is expected to double due to the aging of the population. The baby boomers were all young at the same time, so they're all old at the same time. So now a lot of these diseases have gone up in prevalence because we have such a large generation getting to them. They've gotten to those chronic diseases. And so now it's very prevalent in the population. Parkinson's is the next most common after Alzheimer's, affecting 1% of the population. That seems like a very low number, but it's actually a really high number. For an entire population the size of the United States, to have 1% of the population is in the millions. That's huge. With Parkinson's, dopamine is depleted and you get tremors. The problem with losing your dopamine is kind of like lube. It's lubricant for those nerve endings, and it allows you to do really small movements with your muscles. And when you lose that, you start to shake. And you got it with the nerves. And he really wanted to work in the neonatal department, but he couldn't because the needles that they use for babies are about that big. And he couldn't find the vein on an infant because he shook. So eventually, you get life interference with this, especially if it isn't diagnosed and treated, because it progressively will get worse. I had a cousin that couldn't even hold a coffee cup by the time he was in his 50s because he did this, because he went untreated for so long. These are both treatable through treatment, but you're really treating symptoms. You're not actually treating the disorder itself because there is no treatment for these. The only thing you can do is upkeep, but it will never get better. The only thing I could probably tell you is, I know Eli Lilly has been working on a diagnostic tool for several years now. I think it's now in clinical stages. But it's an injection, and then you'll do a series of CAT scans and MRIs to see if there's a change in your brain. And they're trying to find a medication to go along with it.
How do people get where they get Parkinson's? Or do you not know?
It's partially genetic, like a lot of things are partially genetic, but there are people that have the genes that don't have Parkinson's, and a lot of that actually is all fun button. Hey, look, here's that life list. Hey, let's find out if you're all right. The life list, I had never seen anything like this before, but I do kind of like it. Wow, blank page, awesome. There are several things you can do. Why exercise as you get older will help you throughout your life and help you not develop some of the mental issues that will eventually affect you physically. Strengthens cardiovascular system. Exercising obviously will strengthen your cardiovascular system. It'll help you reduce your blood pressure. The more in shape you are, when you sit down and rest, the lower your blood pressure goes. And that's awesome, because then you don't put as much pressure on your heart. Regulates fuel. Helps insulin work against plaque buildup. Insulin is one of those things that you have a set range, and if it's not in that set range, then you have a problem. And insulin will help you fight the plaque that builds up in your veins. So, or arteries, excuse me. So you have to have insulin, because insulin will help your cardiovascular system. I said in the 9 o'clock class, you'll find as you go through these, and you go from the bottom up, and they're all very much connected, which doesn't really surprise me. Reduces obesity. Well, duh. Being overweight doubles the chance of getting dementia. I'm not surprised by that number. Exercising will elevate your stress threshold. Does anybody play a sport? You do? You feel better after you go play? No? I'm getting a no. It's different for everybody, I guess. I always felt better after I would go for a run, just because you felt relieved a little bit, and maybe things weren't quite so big as they seemed an hour ago. Combats cortisol. Cortisol is interesting to me because cortisol is something that you get all the time, but when you're really, really stressed out, you get a lot of it, and having a lot of cortisol can make you gain weight. What's your mood? Well, that's not surprising either, because it elevates your stress threshold, and it elevates your stress threshold by lifting your mood. Better mood, less chance of dementia, just like reducing obesity. Boosting immune system, well, if it lifts your mood, chances are it's going to lift the immune system too. Because a lot of how your immune system does focuses on how you feel. You ever known anybody that had like a chronic condition, but they had a really, really good attitude about it, so they seem to kind of do better? It's because having a better mood can help boost your T cells, and it lowers your risk for more chronic infections. You can actually live longer and do better. I mean, I actually read a study once where it said pessimists didn't live as long. I consider myself a realist, so we're somewhere in between. My husband disagrees with me, but... Okay, fortifies bones. Like muscles, the more you use them, the stronger they are. I actually was with my brother-in-law once while he was lifting weights, and a guy came up to him and told him he shouldn't lift so much, it was bad for his bones. Your bones are just like your muscles. If resistance is good, I mean, there's too much resistance where you start hurting yourself, but as long as you're not doing that, for the most part, they're good, because it sends nutrients, calcium to your bones, and it strengthens your bones, and you'll be less likely to fall over your hip later. Boost motivation. Well, that wasn't, nope. There you go. Boost motivation, provides reachable challenges. This goes along with your stress threshold, and lifts your mood. Boost motivation, it provides reachable challenges. You're able to reach those challenges because you set them for yourself, and you go out and you do them. So you feel more likely you're ready to go home and study for whatever. Fosters neuroplasticity, strengthens connections between brain cells. This means that your brain cells later won't have to reroute themselves because they're strong enough to do the job they were meant to do. Okay, diet and exercise. This is something that as you get older, it becomes more important, because I know I have good friends, I'm 26, I have good friends my own age that can still eat whatever they want and look like they did when they were 18. Drives me insane. When you exercise, or when you're doing a diet, especially as you get older, and if you do have more chronic problems, you have to do your homework on what they are. You know those commercials that you hear when doctors are always like, weight loss stuff, consult with your physician before embarking on a weight loss program. Well, they're not actually completely wrong, especially if you're an older individual that already has, especially heart, lung, and digestive issues. You do need to know what you're talking about as you get older, because like low carb, not no carb, you have to have carbs. I mean, you just do. There's a reason that pyramid that they send out, when you were in elementary school, there's a reason the bottom section is green. Carbs are really good for your brain, and if you don't get them, then those synapses start to die and you get a whole host of those issues. A study in 2009 showed improvement of symptoms in 27 children when they were given omega-3s for ADHD and no other medication. It was a placebo group and an omega-3 group. And then after a period of time, it was like 6 weeks, then the placebo group started receiving the omega-3 as well. And all of the children that completed the study showed improvement, whether they were on the 6 or the 3-week omega-3s. Focus on aerobic strength, balance, and flexibility. All of these will hold true because all of them have different areas that they're focusing on. Aerobic, that has to do with your heart. Strength, well, bones and muscles. Balance, you have to have balance, give a lot of balance to your core, and a lot of it's also in your mind. And flexibility. Flexibility is important, not necessarily on its own per se, but flexibility ties in a lot with all of 3 of the others, because if you're flexible, you can do more of those. Please don't go backwards. Okay. Do you guys have any questions for me?
How are you?
I'm fine, how are you?
I'm good.
You're talking about something through genetics, but something through genetics, how come the different diseases vary from country to country? So per se, you have some chronic diseases that are really prevalent in America, but they wouldn't be as prevalent in England, or they wouldn't be as prevalent in Japan. How is that so if we're all really a bit core genetically related?
Yeah, we may be genetically related, but the fact is, when those things slowly drift apart and you have your different continents, different people that are on different continents will either value different things genetically, either physically or however. After we started genetic testing, things got a little bit different. But a lot of times you'll have those differences because we were separated for so long. You think Native Americans and Europeans, how long did they live in separate areas? So the Native Americans, I know, Western Indians, there was actually at one point a high prevalence of albinoism in the southwestern United States because certain tribes thought that albinos had been touched by the gods, and everyone had wanted children with an albino. I mean, and so Japan, you'll have certain things that are prevalent because different countries just value different things, and if you didn't cross genetically for so long, that's why a lot of times even now we're able to do genetic testing and do family backgrounds, is because certain genes seem to match up with certain areas because they were so prevalent in that population for so long. So, does that kind of get where you're going? Okay. Anything else? Yeah, I had a, go ahead.
For someone who has Alzheimer's already, what should they do to try to help it? Especially if they're to the point where they can't really even
physically do much anymore. Really to that point is do what you can. Because unfortunately at that point it is maintenance, and it's very, very, you can't really go backwards anymore. You can go forward, but what they try to do is slow down as much as possible how fast you go forward. My grandpa died from a brain cancer, and he lost most of his memory by the end of it. And it's just small little doses that you start to see changes. And at that point, it becomes a medical issue of what's available on the market at that point. Beforehand, if it was an early diagnosis, then normally what they'll do is they'll start you on regimented medications to slow it, and they'll have you do physical and mental exercises to try and stimulate the synapses in your brain to keep going, so they don't give out nearly as fast as they originally would.
So basically, when you get to like stage 4 Alzheimer's,
There's not a lot left to do, it's just keep them doing what they can. Somebody has me. The genetics question, I had, a class in my undergrad, I studied medical anthropology in my undergrad, and, I actually had a class once that, for our final, he gave us a picture of a person, and we had to tell him where they were from based on their physical appearance. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, it's, as we continue, because we can travel so easily around the world, and as people come here and we go there and we marry other people, in a few hundred years, there may not really be such a thing as race. To be honest with you, we'll all be different, but we won't be as different as we are now, I guess. It just depends on how God chooses to use all of us to travel. I guess.
so there's a question about that exam, but this one you would really about that,
The main differences came from if he gave you someone that had a darker skin tone. The problem with that is he gave us an example from that, but he was the example that he gave us was actually Puerto Rican. I think it's an issue now because you had hundreds of years ago you had migrants take people down south, especially the Caribbeans and stuff like that. And so anymore, those people don't consider themselves African Americans; they consider themselves islanders. And so it's different not only in the way that we might look at them and view them, but in the way that they view themselves, which can be touchy at times. But anybody else?
Yeah, I saw you running yesterday. How did you run go?
Pretty good.
How long have you been running?
Oh gosh, years.
Any more questions pertaining to material?
Okay, I've got one for you. All right, what are the boundaries to older people exercising? Yeah, it does depend how old. Good question. Okay, let's say they're 85 years old and broke a hip a year ago.
They should try walking.
Water aerobics.
Water aerobics. That's a good idea. What would be a boundary to them getting to their aerobics class?
If they can drive or not.
If they can drive or not. Good one. And she said they shouldn't be alone. I like that too. You gotta have somebody take you. Getting out of a front step might be difficult if your house doesn't have a ramp to it. Getting down steps would be hard. Going up steps would be hard. Getting in a pool would be hard. Although I do agree it would be great for you. Anything else? Well, we got one more. Forward. Yeah, no. Something Katie filled it like. Okay. Your chance of Alzheimer's drops 7% for every year of education after high school. Why?
You'll learn more stuff and your brain is more connected.
Yeah. As you learn, your brain will make more connections, and as you get older, you're able to use those connections in other ways. So congratulations, you're living longer. You're not looking at it right now like that, are you? If I was there in 2 weeks, I'd rather die. I'm in a master's program, I'm not dead, but there are days I wish I was. Ignore that comment, Dr. Finger. Yeah, this is being recorded, just so you know. Okay, I shouldn't have told you that. All right, any more questions for me? No? Okay. Yes, his name is Reginald Finger.
What's funny about that?
Dr. Finger. No?
Man's name.
All right, there are my pretty references as well.
All right, Katie, thank you very much.
Yep.